So first I want to say to stay tuned. We will be announcing some codes at the end to giveaways to Crack the DAT subscriptions. The first of those is 10% off. Everyone gets it. You can get it now if you want. The code is, I'll show it on the next slide. And then stay tuned for a 50% off winner. So yeah, first things first, I want to address the questions from last week that were asked during the live session before we begin. So first, I was asked if even or odd questions are harder. Honestly, neither. They're both equally as hard. They don't rig the test like that. It's all very random. I don't know. Sometimes we'll have hard ones. Sometimes they get easier. Sometimes they get harder. But there's no rhyme or reason to that. Also, a lot of you guys asked if I could explain my PAT processes, which is awesome. Section today is Crack the PAT. So I'll be going through section talk about like other tips and tricks and how to really tackle that section. And then the last one was someone asked about the floating cubes on the cube counting section. So that I will also address in the cube counting section. But honestly, those are way easier than you think they are. They're just kind of there to go. Okay, so now let's start with this slide. Here we go. Okay, so Crack the PAT is what we're talking about today. So first, like I said earlier, the discounts for Crack the DAT. For 10% off, anyone can use the code Crack PAT App 10. And that's 10% off your subscription, so definitely go and use it. It's really helpful. And then stay tuned for 50% off winner at the end. But make sure you're using those codes and getting the discounts. Very important to save money, especially as you guys are approaching the application cycle, because applications can get very expensive very quickly. Okay, so to begin, general PAT tips. So before we go into section by section dive, I kind of wanted to take this time to talk about the beginning. Of how I studied and kind of what made me successful on the PAT. So practice, practice, practice. And I know I say that a lot for a lot of the sections, which honestly it's true for everything. But for the PAT specifically, it's very vital that you practice every night, every day, especially leading up to your exam, because the PAT is kind of a skill. It's like an art. The more you do it, the better you become at it. And the less you do it, the worse you become. So you can get very rusty very quickly. So never feel like you've satisfied or you've gotten to like that high score that you want. You've gotten the 25, 26 and you say you're good. No, you got to keep doing it. So every night what I did is I had the app on my phone, and every night I would spend 15 to 30 minutes on my phone in bed. Just kind of doing repetition, getting quick answers, and just getting that practice that I needed. Also, having the app on your phone is awesome. So if you're ever in the doctor's office or the dentist's office or driving somewhere or going to your friend's house, or I would just sit there with my phone and do some questions. So it's super convenient because obviously everyone, I think, is on their phone all the time when you're on your downtime. So having the app on your phone just really solidifies that you can keep doing that practice like literally anywhere you go. You don't need your computer, you can just do it on your phone. So that's super, super vital for what at least was vital for my studying. Second thing is work on timing. So I think timing of the PAT is probably what makes it difficult. If you had infinity time to do the PAT, I think everyone could pretty much get every answer right. So work on for yourself, like I said in the beginning, study schedules and all of that, figuring out what works best for yourself. Working on timing also, I think, is very vital to being successful in the PAT. And by that I mean figuring out how much time exactly it's going to take you to do each section, figuring out which sections are going to take you the longest, which ones are going to take you the shortest, and then really figuring out how you're going to go through the test, go through the section on the test. Because clearly it's 90 questions, 60 minutes, like you have to go through really fast, but some sections are going to take you longer than others. So being able to gain time when you can and spend the time where you need to. But by that I mean make sure you're timing yourself on specific sections. So figuring out how long it takes you to do cube counting, figuring out how long it takes you to do pattern folding, and then making sure you're aware of that clock in the corner of the test while you're taking the full section, so you can kind of keep yourself on track and keep yourself paced. Because what the worst thing possible could do was you to get to the test and have 30 seconds to do the pattern fooling questions. So you're obviously not going to get those right. You're going to have to guess and just scramble at the end, which would be very stressful and it's not enjoyable, I can tell you. Also, another thing is don't fixate, keep moving. So by that, I mean, truthfully, a lot of these questions are challenging and it's really easy to get into these holes where you're trying to visualize and see it and really work through the problem. And that, again, makes you lose a lot of time, and time is very valuable on the PAT. So keep moving. If you don't know it, kind of make an educated guess and move on to the next one. Get your points where you can. Don't fixate and just try to very minutely pick apart this one question that's going to take you 5 minutes to do, whereas you have 100 other questions you need to do. And then figure out your own strengths and weaknesses and target those, obviously. So the recurring theme I have in my advice. So first one, keyholes. Quickly visualize top, front, end shapes. So by this, what I mean, and this helps with TFE section 2, but what I mean by quickly visualize the TFE shapes is when you get, I'll go to this next one, when you get this figure here on the left, don't worry about all these little intricacies and these little jags and these whatever. Quickly in your mind go, okay, if I were to look from here down, what would this be? Okay, it's going to be this edge to this edge. So it's just going to be a rectangle, and it's going to be this edge to this edge, a rectangle. So you know it's two rectangles next to each other. So then you go, okay, the only answer that's like that is this. But what can I tell is that they're kind of off center. They're not lined up at one edge. So that's wrong. We just know that. So we got to look at that. So that's what I mean by quickly visualize TFE shapes. Then you go, oh, I can use a pointer on this? Oh, nice. Okay, then find key identifiers in the shape. So what I mean by that is you're here and you can go, okay, well, what's an identifier? Maybe this little pointy thing. You can see that this pointy thing kind of comes up a tiny bit, right? So then you go, okay, well, this pointy thing could be an identifier. For me, I'd use that as an identifier because then you know, okay, if I'm looking from me to the page, so this angle right here, I have a little pointy, I have this outline shape, and I have a little extended bottom. So you go, okay, well, what would that view be? This one's probably trying to get at it, this one's trying to get at it, and this one's trying to get at it because they all have that little, I don't know what shape that would be, like a quad shape. And then you go, okay, well, what has the pointy? Only D has the pointy. So E and B are off. So then you go, okay, well, then what's the last one I'm trying to look at? Okay, well, if it would be from here to here, that's the end view. And that's just going to be this rectangle and this rectangle. So we know that there's all wrong. So C is not even in the question. And then we can go, oh, okay, then the answer must be D. So use process, that's what I mean by use process. Process of elimination. Eliminate confidently. So I would always eliminate before I chose because you can easily convince yourself of right answers, but it's harder to convince yourself not of wrong answers, if that makes any sense. So that's what I mean by that. And then biggest advice I have for this entire section is train your brain to ignore the extraneous projections. So for example, this one, this little side triangle is very tempting to think that that would have any sort of play in the figure. But if you train yourself to just do top, front, end and not worry about stuff like that, it gets way easier to stop confusing yourself. And I feel like that's kind of where most people get tripped up on. Okay, so then top, front, end. So this is why I say kind of use TFE with keyholes, because I found top TFE to be the hardest to visualize in the beginning. But then once you get the hang of it, it becomes easier and easier. So first, practice, work at it. They do become easier as you go. And then you use the momentum from the keyholes and thinking about TFE questions. And then once you do that, this one becomes kind of easier too, because you're seeing in this, you're seeing the 3D shape and you're choosing what the 2D shape is. The other one, you're seeing the 2D shape. You kind of have to imagine the 3D shape, but also take into account only the 2D shape. So what my strategy was for this is I would take whichever view seemed easier to me. So for this one, for example, let's say, hold on. I'm gonna go, oops, sorry. Okay. Okay. So for this one, I would say, what seems easiest to me? Probably this one. This end view. Oh, I want to go back to my pointer view. Okay, this end view seems easiest to me. So what I mean by easiest is you kind of figure out what you think's easiest, but then I would rotate the image in my head to the view that's being asked for of me, and then I'd find the answers which that corresponds. So by this, I would take this L right here, turn it, rotate it so I'm seeing this side right here. So I would kind of 90 degrees flip it this way, so I would see this in the front, and that's what my front view is being asked of me. So these corresponding little lines literally have to line up, like actually parallel with the figure here. So this little line, as it's dotted, means it's not seen. So I would go across to make sure there's a line there. Okay, so A has a line, B doesn't have a line, C doesn't have a line, D does have the line. So we know immediately B, C are out. Then this little line would correspond with this line and this line. So that doesn't differentiate anything between A and D. So then we already know so then my next strategy over here, I would then go from those answer options and turn to the other view to see which works. So A and D. So then we go, okay, well, what's really the difference between A and D? A and D is this either has a little box or there's no box present. So we go, okay, well, that means that I have to either see this box or not see this box. And then I go to the other image and go, okay, so this is me top down. So I have to rotate, instead of rotating it 90 degrees, I rotate my view, myself. Imagine yourself on like a little airplane. You kind of fly to the front of it to view it from here forward. So from here, you can see I have a line here, which means that there is a break, and then I can see two lines here, and then I can't see two lines here, which means that there's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 lines here, and they're going to go. It's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. So what that means is that there's going to be a line that you can see, which is this line right here, this line right here, and there's going to be a line that you can't see. So this one, if this line is the only line you can't see, that wouldn't work because this line right here isn't being visualized, if that makes any sense. So you would know that this can't be the answer, and the answer has to be D. So also what I mean by use fingers to track where the lines are and are not being seen is what I was doing with this pointer. So when I go here to here, that has to be a line, here to here, that has to be a line. And then from this one, this has to be this line, and then this vertical line has to correspond to a vertical line here, which would be this line and this line, or this line and this line. But you can't see an extra little line. You see how there's a space between here? That means that there would be a space. So you know it's not A too. That's what I mean by using your finger to track, because you can kind of literally go across and figure out what those lines are supposed to be. Also, I know a lot of times a lot of these realize the time using to 3D image and then backtrack back to what the 2D image would look like. So that's why I say that it's not necessary you do that. Again, kind of play with the options and see what works best for you. So angle ranking. So this is the fastest section I found, and it's really easy to make up time here. So what I mean by that is just really push yourself through this one. Also, it says don't talk yourself out of the answers. So what I mean by don't talk yourself out of the answers is that a lot of the time you'd be between two and you kind of go back and forth, go back and forth, go back and forth, and then you'd pick something, and then if you keep staring at it, it's really easy to rethink an answer, and that's when I would always get in trouble. Is I would always choose the right one in the beginning, and then after I choose the right one, I would convince myself out of the right one and go to the wrong answer. So just make sure you don't talk yourself out of it and trust yourself. Trust your instincts if you practice enough. So my strategy, start with extremes, either big or small, and then move to other extreme. So what I mean by that is start with extremes. So, well, let me go to this one. Compare two angles that have one arm on the same plane. A lot of the time I wouldn't even rank every angle. I would just choose a few I knew, and then it led me to the only one answer choice. So what I mean by that is, and then cover the long versus short arms and only compare the angle. So these two are kind of set in the same plane. these two are set in the same plane. So what I would do first is I would definitely be comparing these two, and then I'd definitely be comparing only these two. I wouldn't ever try to compare that, because that seems like kind of it's harder to visualize exactly what the comparison angle is when these are on such different planes. So for 1 and 2, I would say, okay, well, this arm and this arm kind of seem to be on the same plane. So then I would just start looking at this angle, right? This arm and this angle. So this angle appears to be slightly more right than this angle. So that means that this one would be smaller. So I would go, okay, immediately I know that 2 is smaller than 1. So then I would go, okay, well, 2 has to be on this side of 1. So then only answers D and A can be a possibility because of the 2 and 1 thing. So then you go, okay, well, 4 and 3 are my 2 outskirts. So then I go, okay, what's the difference between 4 and 3? So this angle is the one that's the same here. This is the one that's moving. So you would take those stagnant, and then you would figure out which one has a tighter right arm. So this one obviously has a tighter right arm than this one does. So then you go, okay, well, 3 is smaller than 4, so 3 has to be smaller than 4. The only answer that compares those like that is D. And I kind of started the other way, but what I would normally do is do the obvious one. So this one seems less obvious to me than this one does. So I would start with the 3 and 4, which would lead me to C and D, and then I would go to 2 and 1. But that's kind of how I work through those. Other tips are cover the long versus short angle arms, and only compare the angles. So sometimes they're really egregious where they have like this long arm that goes from like here to here. If that's confusing, which it does become, you can kind of cut off the long arm angle and cover it with your finger literally on the screen just to compare this tiny angle instead of getting confused by the big arm. Also, sometimes I would extend the arms with my fingers to see the angle more exaggerated if one arm is parallel. So what I mean by that is since these ones are parallel, if this arm was really short and I couldn't really see it, I would kind of use my finger to exaggerate it, opposite of what we were just doing, to kind of see what that angle would look like in comparison to this one. Also, don't fall in the trap of getting too close to the screen. So sometimes when you're doing these, it's really easy to get yourself really close or really far away. And I think both of those are pretty dangerous, but I think that also that's a tip, is that try moving in and out from the computer to gain perspective. And if you do that, then it can kind of become easier to see more exaggerated angles. Hole punching. Okay, so lots of different methods out there. So there's ones where you make a grid and you dot where the holes have been punched. Definitely try them all before you decide what you like in particular. They're very different. I found the grid method to become really time consuming, and I know a lot of people set up their grids before they do that, but I like to have my paper for other reasons, like doing the quantitative reasoning or doing whatever else. You don't get a lot of laminated paper too. So I just thought that would be a huge waste of time, and honestly I didn't find it that helpful. So going through, but it does work for a lot of people, that's why it's a method that's suggested. But so going through and making sure you do them all and figuring out which one works best for you is going to be the most ideal situation. So my strategy is I would